In the shadows of Mexico's criminal underworld, one man ruled longer than almost any cartel boss in modern history. A man who avoided the spotlight, avoided prison, and avoided the fate that caught up with nearly every major trafficker of his generation. His name is Ismael El Mayo Zambada, the ghost of Sinaloa, the man nobody could catch, until everything began to crumble. This is the rise and fall of a legend who lived most of his life in the dark. Ismael Zambada was born in 1948 in the rural communities of Sinaloa, Mexico. He didn't come from wealth, power, or influence. He grew up farming, working long hours under the sun, earning barely enough to survive. But in Sinaloa, poverty was more than a struggle. It was a trap. And like many young men searching for a way out, Zambada looked toward the mountains, toward a growing illegal trade that promised money, respect, and escape. In the 1970s, Mayo began with small smuggling operations, transporting substances across borders using tiny networks. He wasn't the loudest. He wasn't the most violent. But he was smart, quiet, patient. And in a world where impulsive criminals rose fast and died young, Mayo climbed slowly, carefully, and silently. By the late 1980s, he had joined forces with major traffickers in the region, forming alliances that later helped create what the world would know as the Sinaloa Cartel. Then came the partnership that shaped the global drug landscape. Mayo teamed up with Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, a rising boss whose ambition matched Mayo's intelligence. But unlike Chapo, who loved attention, power, and public presence, Mayo stayed hidden, letting others take the spotlight and the heat. This strategy worked. While Chapo became internationally famous and heavily hunted, Mayo operated from the shadows, running logistics, building alliances, creating distribution networks, and negotiating like a ghost. The world recognized Sinaloa as one of the most powerful cartels ever built. And Mayo was one of its unseen architects. As the 1990s and 2000s unfolded, legendary traffickers fell one by one. Capos were arrested, organizations collapsed. But Mayo, he remained free, untouched. Authorities called him the Phantom of the Mountains. No confirmed photo, no arrest, no public appearance. Rumors said he lived deep in the Sierra Madre Mountains, that he moved constantly, that he had hundreds of lookouts and entire villages protecting him. The United States placed millions in reward money on his head. Still, no capture. For decades, Mayo became a myth. Unlike other cartel bosses who ruled through violence, Mayo ruled through business discipline. He built relationships. He avoided unnecessary wars. He trusted no one outside his inner circle, and he kept his own family heavily involved in key operations, believing they were the only people he could rely on. But this decision would eventually become his downfall. As years passed, authorities shifted strategies. Instead of chasing Mayo, the ghost, they targeted the people closest to him. One by one, his sons and relatives were arrested. His network began to weaken. His influence began to crack. When El Chapo was captured and extradited, Mayo was suddenly the last standing giant. But even then, he couldn't escape the pressure. Within the Sinaloa Cartel, loyalty began to shift. There were new leaders, new betrayals, new internal fights. The unity that once protected Mayo began to fracture. Some factions sided with Chapo's sons, Los Chapitos. Others remained loyal to Mayo. Internal conflict made him more vulnerable than ever before. Even in the shadows, the walls were closing in. After over 5 decades in the criminal world, the once untouchable Mayo found himself increasingly isolated, older, and surrounded by collapsing alliances. Though never officially captured, his power declined sharply. His network shrank. His family faced charges, and rival groups gained strength. The empire he helped build began to slip away, not through bullets or betrayal, but through time. The fall of El Mayo Zambada wasn't dramatic. It was slow, quiet, and inevitable. For decades, Ismael El Mayo Zambada was the world's most elusive cartel boss, a man who survived through silence, strategy, and shadows. But as history shows, even the darkest legends eventually fade. This has been the rise and fall of El Mayo, a ghost who ruled an empire until the darkness finally caught up.